When the real leading lady showed up, I was already carrying his child. I couldn't fight destiny. He once risked everything for me, breaking off his engagement with her. But later he resented me deeply. Couldn't even stand looking at me. Finally, I got tired. I let go of our toxic relationship, even gave up our child. Until one evening, 6 years later, a little boy knocked on my door. He stood there with a serious face and said, "My dad doesn't want me anymore. Can I stay with you?" I froze, speechless. Asher Wilson frowned, lifted his adorable little face and recited carefully. My teacher said, "Parents have the responsibility and obligation to raise their children." The half-open door interrupted his rehearsed speech. I stepped aside calmly and said, "Come in." The warm light from inside made his eyes widen slightly. His eyes sparkled mysteriously. He lifted his chin, puffed, and walked in obediently. When I closed the door and turned around, Asher was curiously looking around my apartment, catching my gaze. He quickly looked away, nervously gripping his backpack straps. With a tense little face, he announced, "My name is Asher Wilson." It sounded like an introduction, but also like a reminder that he was the child River Wilson and I had together. I knew from the first moment I saw him. I was certain who he was, because he looked almost identical to River Wilson, like they were carved from the same mold. Seeming disappointed by my calm reaction, he unhappily turned his head away, refusing to look at me. I placed his small, yellow backpack in the entryway and took him to wash his hands. "Let's eat first," Asher obediently said. "Okay." By the time I brought out the food, he had already climbed onto the chair by himself. I asked him why he suddenly came to find me. Asher buried his head, looking at the vegetables in his bowl. His little round head bobbed up and down as he mumbled. I had a disagreement with him. He got upset and told me to leave, said never to come back. So it was a tantrum. Running away from home. River Wilson would probably come get him soon. That made sense. 6 years ago, the Wilson family fought me vigorously for custody of Asher. There was no way they'd give him up. Now, my chopsticks paused. I couldn't quite describe what I was feeling. I hadn't expected Asher tonight. So, I only made a simple dinner. 2 dishes and a soup. He was picky. He wouldn't eat onions or carrots. After picking through everything, he had nothing left to eat. Asher stared miserably at the mangled vegetables, sneaking glances at me, then guiltily swallowed them down. When we first met, he had a hint of arrogance and pride. Now he was picky and didn't like vegetables. He must have been pampered and spoiled rotten at the Wilson house. He probably hadn't suffered much. I felt a bit relieved after washing the dishes. I waited for River to send someone to pick him up. I waited until 9:30 p.m. 6-year-olds get sleepy early. He pulled out pajamas from his backpack, looked around with his eyes and pouted. "There's only one bedroom. Do I have to squeeze into one bed with you tonight?" I glanced at the clock on the wall. For some reason, the Wilson family still hadn't sent anyone. I had to compromise, yes. "You'll sleep with me tonight." I thought Asher would throw a fit. After all, my cramped, one-bedroom apartment was nothing compared to the Wilson family's luxury mansion. But Asher just pressed his lips together, his eyes flickering. After washing his face and struggling into his pajamas, he kicked his legs and climbed onto the bed by himself, just like at dinner. Though he seemed disgusted, he still quietly ate all the vegetables I put in his bowl. He burrowed under the blanket, creating a little mountain. Somehow he found a storybook, peeked out at me and couldn't help urging, "Aren't you going to read me a bedtime story?" He actually looked pretty happy about it. After putting Asher to sleep, I pulled up River Wilson's number. After hesitating for a long time, I still didn't call. River and I had been separated for 6 years. At first, we both thought we could fight destiny back. Then my family suddenly went bankrupt. The Wilson family broke off our engagement, secretly arranging for River to marry Lily Harper instead for me. He risked everything to break off the engagement with Lily. He even gave up his position as heir old mister. Wilson was so angry with him, he couldn't get out of bed for half a month. Seeing me cry, he still endured the pain, smiling lazily as he comforted me. I thought things would get better. The bankruptcy would get better. River would get better. Our future would get better. But they didn't. River and I got married in secret without telling anyone. Maybe because River had been so unwavering in his commitment to me. When I got pregnant, I never once considered not having the baby. Until right before delivery. I called River over and over through the pain, but he never answered. A neighbor took me to the hospital. When I woke up, I saw a cold, indifferent River Wilson. I didn't understand how a person could change so drastically overnight. So drastically that when he looked at me, his eyes were full of unfamiliar disgust. Lily Harper came to see me once. From her, I learned the truth about this world, due to a system error in timing. When the delayed leading lady finally appeared, The male lead had already developed feelings for someone else. As a correction, the male lead's misplaced emotions began to reverse. However much he loved me before, he now resented me just as much. Lily looked at me with pity and sadness. Before leaving, she asked quietly, "Have you thought about what will happen to your child's future?" I suddenly froze, feeling lost. Who should I blame? Should I blame River Wilson? But he couldn't even understand his own feelings. Should I blame destiny? But what good would that do? I couldn't change anything. At that time, my parents got into an accident on their way to visit me. At the hospital, they fell into a coma, possibly becoming unresponsive for life. I nearly broke down. Lily's words kept echoing in my mind. I just felt this world was so exhausting, so exhausting. When I pushed open the window and looked down, the baby in the hospital bed suddenly started crying loudly. In a daze, I thought if I left this world, what would happen to him? Would this world allow his existence? Would Lily mistreat him? Or would he be despised by River Wilson, like me enduring countless grievances alone, and finally fade away quietly while everyone wished for it? I started trembling all over. I went back to the bed, my hands shaking as I reached toward his neck. I wanted to take him with me, but then he stopped crying. His red tear-stained eyes stared at me as if no matter where he went, he wanted to stay with his mother, until the nurses and bodyguards sensed something was wrong and burst through the door, roughly pushing me away. I looked down at my trembling hands, finally realizing what terrible thing I had almost done. Under Lily's manipulation, the news quickly reached the Wilson family. Old Mr. Wilson demanded to see me and began fighting for custody. I didn't ask for anything. I let go of River Wilson, who despised me, took custody, and signed the divorce papers very decisively. I only asked for $2 million. Youth knows no sorrow. The former heiress of the Jade family, who once casually spent hundreds of thousands, now found herself desperate, over a few $1,000s in hospital bills. From beginning to end, River Wilson never appeared. He resented me so much he wouldn't even look at me, so I accepted my fate. I let go of our toxic relationship and gave up our child. I freed him and I freed myself, until a soft little bundle threw himself into my arms, and I finally snapped back to reality. Asher closed his eyes and whimpered, curling up sweetly in my embrace, as if he had finally found a comfortable position, and was sleeping soundly. He anxiously gripped my clothes tightly, as if afraid that when he opened his eyes would disappear. I looked at that innocent, childish face and couldn't help but sigh softly. If he knew his mother wanted to end his life the moment he was born, would he still come looking for me? He'd probably run away from me as fast as he could. By morning, River Wilson still hadn't appeared. I didn't know what he was trying to do. The Wilson family fought so hard for custody back then, but now they just didn't want him anymore. I woke Asher up early and took a taxi to send him to school. His kindergarten was in a different city from mine, but fortunately only an hour's drive away. Before getting out of the car, he made me promise 3 times that I would pick him up after school, whining and clinging to my hand, until he spotted a car in front of the kindergarten. His eyes lit up. He hurriedly pulled me out of the car. As we got closer, he deliberately slowed down, pretending to casually block the path of a chubby little boy who had just gotten out, as if intentionally showing off. Asher held my hand and waved it in front of the boy. Then very loudly, in a voice everyone could hear, he asked me, "Mom, you'll come pick me up after school, right?" This was the first time Asher called me Mom, perhaps because I had been absent for 6 whole years. He had never actively called me Mom, not even when he knocked on my door. The chubby boy stared at me skeptically and said, "If you have a mom, why didn't she ever take you to school before?" Asher huffed, his gaze full of disdain. "My mom is busy with work today. She especially took time off to bring me to school." He emphasized the word especially very heavily. He held my hand and walked to the kindergarten gate, in front of everyone, as if showing off, wanting everyone to see. Before parting, he asked again, very shyly, "You'll come pick me up, right?" Seeing I didn't respond, he glared at me, then said very anxiously in a small voice, "You promised me in the car. Adults can't go back on their word." I helplessly crouched down, smoothing out his flipped-up collar, and ruffled his hair. His hair was black and soft. Felt nice to touch. "Okay, I'll come pick you up." He couldn't help but smile, but tried hard to keep a straight face, lifting his chin maturely and saying reservedly, "Okay, I'll remember to wait for you." Only after his figure completely disappeared from my sight did I look away. I found his teacher and asked about Asher's situation at kindergarten. The teacher hemmed and hawed, finally sighing and complaining. "I know the Wilson family is powerful and influential, and what I say probably won't matter. But Asher's mom, no matter how busy you are, you can't just ignore your child. Since he enrolled, no one has ever come to a parent-teacher conference. Now all the kids in the class are saying he doesn't have a mom. This is really bad for his mental and emotional development. No one had ever come to a parent-teacher conference, even if ever. Wilson was busy and didn't like this child. Was he too lazy to even send an assistant? I frowned, thinking for the first time that I might have made the wrong decision. Maybe I shouldn't have given up custody back then, but at that time, I was penniless. My parents were in comas, in the hospital. I couldn't even support myself. How could I have raised a fragile child? I pulled up River Wilson's number, hesitated, then dialed. I decided to have a serious talk with him. If River Wilson really didn't want to raise him anymore, I would bring Asher to live with me. I couldn't provide him with conditions as good as the Wilson families. I had enough to raise a child. Now, the phone had just started ringing when I heard a ringtone behind me. The ringing stopped abruptly. I turned around slowly, my fingers stiffening around my phone. The morning breeze felt suddenly biting, sweeping fallen leaves across the asphalt, but I couldn't feel the chill. All I could feel was the heavy, suffocating weight of the gaze fixed upon me. River Wilson stood 10 feet away, beneath the shade of an old sycamore tree. He was still as devastatingly handsome as he had been 6 years ago, dressed in a charcoal overcoat that draped perfectly over his broad shoulders. But the arrogant, untouchable aura that used to surround him was crushing. His cheekbones were sharper, his jawline tense, and beneath his dark, heavy eyes lay a shadow of profound exhaustion. He held his phone in one hand, slowly lowering it. "You called." His voice was hoarse, scraping against the morning air like sandpaper. For a moment, the world stopped. The 6 years of bitter resentment, the paralyzing depression, the memory of my trembling hands in that sterile hospital room, it all rushed back, threatening to drown me. I forced myself to stand tall, swallowing the lump in my throat. "You followed him," I stated, my voice remarkably steady. "You knew he ran away, and you just let a 6-year-old wander the streets until he found my door?" "I was behind him the entire time," River replied quietly. He took a step forward, then forced himself to stop, as if crossing an invisible boundary would burn him. My men trailed his taxi. "I stood outside your apartment building until the lights went out. I couldn't intervene." "Couldn't or wouldn't?" I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Did Lily Harper tell you not to? Or did the sight of me still disgust you so much that you'd rather let your son brave the night alone than knock on my door?" River flinched. The reaction was so visceral, so entirely unlike the cold, indifferent man who had forced me into signing those divorce papers, that it made me pause. He closed his eyes, a muscle feathering at his jaw. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Please. Just 10 minutes. There's a coffee shop across the street." I wanted to say no. I wanted to turn on my heel, go to my modest job, and pretend the Wilson family didn't exist. But the memory of Asher's trembling little hands holding onto my shirt last night, and the teacher's sigh about his neglected upbringing, anchored me to the spot. 10 minutes, I said coldly. We sat in a quiet corner booth of a nearly empty cafe. I didn't touch the coffee he ordered for me. I just stared at him, waiting. River stared at the black liquid in his own cup for a long time before he finally spoke. "He told you they had a fight, that I kicked him out, did you?" I told him that if he wanted a mother so badly, he should go find the one who abandoned him, because the one at home would never love him, River said, the words falling from his lips like poison. I slammed my hands on the table. "You bastard. He's 6 years old. If you and Lily didn't want him, why did you fight me so ruthlessly for custody? Just to torture him? Just to punish me? Because if I hadn't taken him, you both would be dead." The cafe suddenly felt vacuum sealed. All the ambient noise, the clinking of cups, the hum of the espresso machine, faded into a dull roar. "What?" I breathed. River looked up, and for the first time in 6 years, I saw his eyes clearly. They weren't filled with the unfamiliar disgust from the hospital. They were brimming with a desperate, agonizing sorrow. "Do you really think a person can change overnight?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Do you think I could spend years defying my family, giving up my inheritance, holding you through the darkest nights when your family went bankrupt, only to suddenly look at you with hatred the day our son was born?" I froze. The words Lily Harper had spoken to me in the hospital echoed in my mind, due to a system error in timing. The male lead's misplaced emotions began to reverse. "I was trapped in my own body," River whispered, his hands gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. "It started a month before you gave birth. Every time I looked at you, my brain screamed that I loved you, but my mouth would sneer. I would try to walk toward you, and my legs would carry me to Lily Harper instead. I watched myself break your heart, and I couldn't even shed a tear. It was like I was a puppet, and someone else was pulling the strings." He reached into his coat and pulled out a thick, leather-bound journal, pushing it across the table. It took me a year to realize what was happening, he continued, his breathing ragged. Whenever I felt hostility toward you or the baby, my body was my own. Whenever I felt love, the correction took over. Lily had some sort of invisible power. A set of rules. As long as she was the leading lady, anyone who threatened her narrative had to be eliminated. I stared at the journal, but didn't touch it. My parents' car accident. It wasn't an accident, River said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. It was a plot correction. They were rushing to the hospital to support you, which would have given you the strength to fight back. So, they were removed from the board. A sickening chill washed over me. The despair I felt that day, the terrifying urge to end my own life, to take my baby with me. Had that been the system too? Pushing me toward a tragic exit to clear the way for the real female lead? I fought for custody, River said, breaking through my horrifying realization, because Lily told me, in passing, that a motherless child raised by his stepmother would make a great redemption arc for her. If I had left him with you, you would have remained a threat to her story. The system would have engineered another accident, a gas leak, a robbery. You would have died, and Asher would have been handed back to her anyway. So you took him. I choked out, tears suddenly blurring my vision. You took him, and you ignored him. I had to. River's voice broke completely. A single tear escaped, tracing a line down his sharp cheek. If I showed him an ounce of love, she would see it. The system would register him as an obstacle. So I played the part. I became the cold, ruthless CEO who only kept his heir out of duty. I never went to his parent-teacher conferences. I never hugged him in front of the staff. I hired the strictest nannies. I let everyone think I despised him, just to keep him alive. I covered my mouth, a sob tearing through my throat. I thought of Asher, carefully picking out the vegetables, meticulously behaving, his little shoulders carrying the weight of a father's feigned hatred. Why now? I demanded, wiping my face aggressively. Why let him come to me now? River leaned forward, a dangerous, predatory glint replacing the sorrow in his eyes. Because for 6 years, I haven't just been playing the puppet. I've been dismantling her. River tapped the journal. Her system relies on my status, my wealth, and my affection. I spent 6 years transferring the core assets of the Wilson Group into shell companies under your name. I systematically destroyed the Harper family's political backing. Her plot armor is cracking. The system is running out of energy. I stared at him, utterly stunned. Under my name? You asked for $2 million, River gave a bitter, self-deprecating smile. I gave you the entire Wilson empire. It's held in a blind trust. Lily thinks she's married to the most powerful man in the city. In reality, she's married to a hollow shell. Her leading lady status is crumbling because the male lead has nothing left to give her. You're insane, I whispered. I am a father who watched his wife nearly jump out of a hospital window, he replied fiercely. I am a man who was forced to watch the woman he loved sign divorce papers with trembling hands. I had to be insane to survive it. He stood up, pulling a sleek black card and a set of keys from his pocket, laying them gently on the table. He needs his mother, River said softly. I've pushed him away so hard that he finally snapped. He hates me, and that's okay. Let him hate me. But please, love him for both of us. The system is too weak to hurt you now. Keep him safe. I'll handle the rest. Before I could say another word, River turned and walked out of the cafe, his dark coat disappearing into the bustling morning crowd. For the next week, my life became a bizarre paradox of domestic bliss and underlying dread. Asher settled into my tiny apartment as if he had always belonged there. The arrogant, spoiled little heir vanished, replaced by a fiercely protective, clingy little boy. He would hold my hand while we walked to the grocery store, insist on helping me wash the dishes, mostly just splashing water everywhere, and curl up against my chest every night, demanding 3 bedside stories instead of 1. True to his word, River never showed up, but his presence was everywhere. I found out my rent had been paid for the next 10 years. A state-of-the-art security system was quietly installed in my building. The refrigerator somehow restocked itself with premium, organic groceries whenever we were out. And then there was the journal. I stayed up late reading it. It was a harrowing chronicle of a man fighting a war inside his own mind. Pages filled with frantic handwriting. March 4th. Tried to buy her favorite lilies. Hands wouldn't open the wallet. Ended up buying roses for Elle. Felt like vomiting. October 12th. Asher's first steps. I wanted to cheer. Instead, I yelled at the nanny for making too much noise. I saw him cry. I am a monster. August 9th. Transferred the European shipping division to her trust. The system didn't notice. It only monitors romantic actions, not corporate sabotage. I will bleed this empire dry for them. My resentment toward him, carefully cultivated over 6 years, began to shatter, replaced by an agonizing ache. The calm broke on a Tuesday afternoon. I was leaving the architectural firm where I worked as a junior drafter, a job I had painstakingly acquired to rebuild my life, when a sleek, silver Maybach blocked my path. The rear window rolled down, revealing a face I hadn't seen in 6 years. Lily Harper. She looked perfect as always. Designer dress, flawless makeup, not a hair out of place. But there was a frantic, wild look in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Get in," she commanded. "I have a child to pick up," I said coldly, stepping around the car. "The system is glitching," she suddenly shrieked, dropping all pretense of elegance. Pedestrians turned to look, but she didn't care. She threw the door open and stepped out, her heels clicking aggressively on the pavement. "What did you do? You were supposed to be the tragic ex. You were supposed to fade into obscurity." I stopped, turning to face her. I wasn't the broken, bankrupt 22-year-old girl in the hospital gown anymore. I crossed my arms, staring her down. "I didn't do anything," I said calmly. "It seems your leading man just isn't that into you." Lily's face contorted. "Don't mock me. You don't know what I sacrificed to get this script. I had to endure years of him looking at me like I was made of glass, giving me everything but never actually touching me. But my affection meter was at 90%. I was winning." She grabbed her own hair, looking deranged. "And then yesterday, the meter plummeted. It's at 0. The system says the male lead has gone rogue. So River had finally pulled the plug. The hollow empire had collapsed, and Lily's illusion was shattered. "You stole my life, Lily," I said, my voice dangerously low. "You put my parents in a coma. You forced a father to emotionally abuse his own son just to keep him alive. If your system is crashing, it's because this world was never yours to begin with. It's not a script. We are real people." "No," Lily screamed, lunging at me. Before she could even close the distance, 2 towering men in black suits materialized from the shadows, grabbing her arms and pinning her back. "Bodyguards. River's men. Let me go." Lily thrashed, her eyes darting around wildly. Suddenly, she froze, her pupils dilating. I could almost hear the robotic voice echoing in her skull. "Warning. Hostility toward key plot characters detected. Plot armor failing. Energy depletion at 99%. Initiating final correction protocol." Lily let out a guttural, terrifying scream. "If I can't have the ending, and no one will." With a surge of unnatural, adrenaline-fueled strength, system-granted strength, she violently threw off the 2 massive bodyguards. She didn't lunge at me. Instead, she bolted toward the Maybach, threw herself into the driver's seat, and slammed the accelerator. But she wasn't aiming for me. She spun the wheel, the tires screeching against the asphalt as the car tore down the street, heading straight for the elementary school district. "Asher." My heart stopped. "Asher," I screamed, breaking into a dead sprint. The school was only 3 blocks away, but the Maybach was flying. I ran so hard I tasted blood in my throat, the world blurring into a chaotic swirl of panic. No, not my baby. I turned a corner onto the school street just as the dismissal bell rang. Children were flooding out the gates. I saw Asher's bright yellow backpack instantly. He was standing by the curb, holding his teacher's hand, looking around eagerly for me. The roar of the Maybach's engine echoed like a jet turbine. Lily was flooring it, aiming the massive silver grill directly at the curb where my son stood. "Asher, move," I shrieked, my voice tearing my vocal cords. He looked up, his small face freezing in confusion, then pure terror as the metal beast barreled toward him. The teacher screamed, paralyzed by shock. I was too far away. I couldn't reach him. The world moved in horrifying slow motion. Suddenly, a black SUV came out of nowhere. It didn't brake. It didn't swerve. It accelerated with a deafening roar, cutting a violent diagonal path straight across the intersection, placing itself directly between Asher and the speeding Maybach. Crash. The impact was catastrophic. The sound of crunching metal and shattering glass was deafening. The Maybach T-boned the black SUV with such immense force that the SUV was lifted onto 2 wheels, skidding violently across the pavement before slamming into a reinforced concrete lamppost. The Maybach spun out, smoke billowing from its crushed hood, before coming to a dead halt. Silence descended upon the street, broken only by the hiss of radiators and the distant screams of terrified parents. I collapsed onto my knees, gasping for air, my vision going black at the edges. Mom, a small, trembling body, slammed into my chest. Asher wrapped his arms around my neck, crying hysterically. I crushed him against me, burying my face in his soft black hair, weeping uncontrollably. He was safe. He was unharmed. But when I looked up over his shoulder at the wreckage, my blood ran cold. I recognized the license plate on the mangled black SUV. River. I breathed. I gently pushed Asher into the arms of his pale, shaking teacher. Don't look. Stay here with him. Please. I stumbled to my feet and ran toward the crushed SUV. The driver's side door was caved in, the window shattered into a million glittering diamonds on the asphalt. Smoke poured from the engine. River. I screamed, tearing at the warped metal handle. It wouldn't budge. I grabbed a piece of debris from the road and smashed the remaining glass, ignoring the shards biting into my palms. River was slumped over the steering wheel. His face was covered in blood, his breathing shallow and erratic. River, no, please look at me. I sobbed, reaching through the broken window to cup his face. My tears mixed with his blood. Wake up. You promised you'd handle it. You promised. He groaned, his heavy eyelids fluttering open. His eyes were unfocused, but when they found my face, a faint, agonizingly slow smile touched his lips. He's safe? River whispered, blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth. He's safe. He's fine. I choked out, pressing my forehead against his cold hand. Just hold on. The ambulance is coming. River let out a shuddering breath. He turned his head slightly, looking toward the smoking Maybach. Through the shattered windshield of the other car, I saw Lily. She was slumped against the airbag, conscious but trapped. As I watched, a faint, glowing blue code seemed to lift from her skin, flickering like a dying television screen before dissolving into thin air. System disconnected. Host abandoned. River saw it too. He looked back at me, the heavy burden that had shadowed his eyes for 6 long years finally lifting. It's over, he murmured, his voice fading. The plot is broken. River, stay with me, I pleaded, gripping his hand tighter as his eyes began to roll back. We need you. Asher needs his father. You can't leave us alone now, do you hear me? I love you, he whispered, a tear tracking through the blood on his cheek. I always only loved you. His eyes closed, and his hand went limp in mine. The hospital corridor smelled exactly like it did 6 years ago. Sterile alcohol, bleach, and despair. I sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair outside the ICU, staring blankly at my bandaged hands. Asher was asleep beside me, his head resting heavily on my thigh, his small hand still clutching the hem of my shirt. The Wilson family had arrived in a storm of chaos. Old Mr. Wilson, looking incredibly frail, had taken one look at me, then at Asher, and sat heavily on a bench across from us without a word. The arrogance of the past was entirely gone. The surgery took 9 hours. When the doctor finally emerged, his scrubs were stained, and his face was drawn. I held my breath, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. He's stabilized, the doctor said quietly. Multiple fractured ribs, a punctured lung, and severe concussive trauma. But he survived the worst of it. He's young, and his will to live is remarkable. I let out a sob, covering my face with my hands as the crushing weight of terror finally evaporated. Old Mr. Wilson bowed his head, crying silently into his cane. Days bled into weeks. The aftermath of the crash rewrote reality. Lily Harper was arrested the moment she was discharged from the hospital. Without her system to protect her, the authorities quickly uncovered a web of financial crimes, bribery, and evidence linking her to the tampering of my parents' vehicles 6 years ago. The media had a field day. The perfect leading lady was facing life in prison. And then, a week after the crash, I received a call from another hospital wing. My parents, who had been unresponsive for 6 years, had simultaneously shown spikes in brain activity. The system suppression was gone. They were waking up. Everything River had promised was coming true. The stolen world was righting itself. When River finally woke up, it was a quiet Tuesday morning. The winter frost was melting against the window panes, catching the early sunlight. I was sitting by his bed, peeling an apple, when I felt a weak tug on my sleeve. I dropped the knife and looked up. River's dark eyes were open, looking at me through the tangle of tubes and monitors. He looked terrible, pale, bruised, half mummified in bandages, but to me, he had never looked more beautiful. You're peeling it entirely wrong. His voice was a raspy, barely audible croak, but the lazy, familiar smile was there. The smile of the boy who had once risked the world to love me. Tears spilled over my lashes. I leaned over, carefully wrapping my arms around his uninjured shoulder, burying my face in his neck. He weakly lifted his hand, burying his fingers in my hair, holding me as if he were starving for the touch. I'm sorry, he whispered into my hair, for everything. Stop, I cried softly. You saved us. You saved us both. A small voice interrupted the moment. Are you going to die? River turned his head. Asher was standing in the doorway, wearing his little yellow backpack, clutching a painfully squashed bouquet of dandelions he must have picked from the hospital lawn. His little face was pinched into a scowl to hide his trembling lip. River's breath hitched. For the first time, there was no system to monitor his reaction. No invisible force to dictate his emotions. He could look at his son, his own flesh and blood, exactly how he wanted to. No, buddy, River said, his voice thick with tears. I'm not going anywhere. Asher hesitated, his pride warring with his 6-year-old need for comfort. Then, with a little hiccup, he dropped the dandelions and ran to the bed. He couldn't reach, so I lifted him up, carefully setting him on the edge of the mattress, avoiding River's injuries. Asher stared at River's bandaged face, then gently reached out a tiny finger, poking a scratch on River's cheek. You broke my mom's promise, Asher sniffled, his big eyes accusing. She said she was coming to pick me up, but you crashed your car and made her cry instead. River let out a watery chuckle. I'm sorry. I'll buy you 100 ice creams to make up for it. I don't want ice cream, Asher muttered, stubbornly looking away, though his small hand firmly grabbed onto River's hospital gown. I want you to come home. Both of you. River looked up at me, his eyes full of a hopeful, desperate question. The trauma of the last 6 years couldn't be erased overnight. We had missed so much. We had scars that would ache when it rained, and nightmares that would still wake us in the dark. But as I looked at the man who had shattered his own soul to protect ours, and the little boy who was finally holding his father's hand without fear, I knew destiny hadn't beaten us. We had beaten destiny. I reached out, placing my hand over Asher's and River's. We will, I smiled, the morning light catching the tears on my face. We're going home.